Hello everyone! It is your host, Zipsaw with Zipsaw's Art. Welcome, welcome. And today, we're going to be talking about that artwork over there. This is going to be a little bit different than the Degenerate Banner video, if you haven't watched that yet. Before we go further into the video, I want to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you everyone who has jumped aboard the channel and has hit that lovely subscribe button. It means a lot. That being said, there's a few other things I want to say before we talk about that artwork. I want to talk to you about the hardware and software that I have utilized in order to complete the illustration. First is the hardware that I used, which is the Huion Canvas 13. I've had my Canvas 13 for approximately 3 years now, and it is very well priced, does everything that you want it to do, nothing that you don't want it to do, ton of accessories, colors, and so on and so forth. Next is the software that I'm using, which is ClipArt Studio. And you can go by clipartstudio.com, which of course will be linked in the description below. And you can buy it right now for 60% off. And to Huion and ClipArt, I'll sponsor you. Now with all of that out of the way, let us talk about the illustration that I've just recently done. Let's start right at the beginning. And as far as coming up with the pose, that is the first thing I want to think about when I am wanting to create a character, is what pose do I want this particular character to be in? Do I want it to be static, dynamic, or a little bit of both? And I tend to want to choose a static dynamic pose, as you see here, where something that's a little bit better than just standing still with your arms out side to side, but not in a action pose where it's like punching or kicking something. And that's why I like to call it a static dynamic pose. Now, I wanted to actually create this pose and start this rough draft in a live stream, but I was actually so frustrated that I didn't understand how to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to have possibly her arm over her knee, and like she was resting her arm over her knee. I wanted the whole leg up on a box kind of idea. And so I was so frustrated with not being able to actually realize this pose in my head. And I tried to find references to, and I just simply couldn't find a pose that had someone's leg was up on an object or something like that. And then, of course, posing the upper body in such a way that I was like, that's what I want to use. So I got so discouraged that I actually ended up stopping the stream early and deleting the video, so you'll never see it. That being said, I took the time to draw myself back and really hone in on a fundamental of where should I actually begin. And so that's where we get to this part here. As you see, I made a plane of existence, so a horizon and a perspective. And then through that perspective, I drew a box. And from there, I then started to draw out this pose. And as you can see here, I think having the box really did help me realize how tall I wanted the character. And this is another thing too that was also difficult, was I'm drawing a goblin. And I also understand that goblins have different proportions, but I kind of left it a little bit more humanoid of a form than I think a traditional goblin. I don't know. And this was the first time I've ever done something like this. So this was a very rough sketch. This was a very rough idea on, okay, well, how do I want the nose to be? How should the facial structure be? What do we think about a goblin? I'm thinking, well, she should probably be pretty but ugly at the same time. And then coming up with a hairstyle too, as we see here, I was like, okay, maybe a really long flowy hairstyle, very poofy, wild-like. And as you see, I'm trying to figure out a good facial expression, something that would be catching and would be reminiscent of like, yeah, this is what a goblin should be. And then as we see here, I'm trying different hairstyles, right? I'm like, well, maybe I want something a little less poofy, more sleek. There was a lot of things I was playing with her hairstyle. And it took me a while to try to figure out, like, how do I want her bangs to be? How do I want, like, I'm telling you, like, the hair alone was a problem. I then started thinking about, well, how about braids? I think braids would be really cool. And they would also add movement to my character because we can enact wind on it. So having tufts of hair and then these braids come out from behind and just kind of be like this additional feature to her hair, it would have been something nice to see all that movement And when we are in character creation, that's something that we really want to look at, is your character is, of course, on a 2D plane of existence, but we want to create movement. We want to be able to show that a character is alive in some way. And so a good way to do that is to fundamentally add that movement through curvature and through basically the perception that you're trying to accomplish is a wind or a wave or something of that nature. Now, the next things, of course, as you've been seeing this, I've obviously been toying with clothing. This is another thing that I just had not a whole lot of idea of what kind of clothing I want her to wear. Also working on her gun and the bomb in the hand, just getting some basic layouts, just wanting to make sure that as far as I'm just starting to structure the idea of our goblin chick and like what kind of attitude, what kind of things would she be bringing along with her? Who is this goblin? And when you start asking this question, this is when you start formulating ideas about jewelry, accessories, clothing, weapons systems, if they even deal with it, and what someone, if they were to look at your character, they'd be like, ah, yeah, I can definitely see that. And so I really wanted this ragtag adventurer style haphazard goblin girl that just gives all care to the wind, doesn't matter, and essentially has a mishmash of clothes or torn up. And I think that I did a really good job of emphasizing this. Now, you're also going to see here where I paid a lot of attention to her anatomy, and I've redrawn her anatomy so many times. I was not satisfied with the facial structure, was not satisfied with just all of the anatomy going on. And as far as going back through and realizing that I haven't realized my artwork yet. I'm not feeling it. I'm not vibing with it. I'm not going to choose, and this is something that maybe artists don't really consider, is instead of just working through your problem and just be like, well, it's not really what I'm looking for, but I mean, I've already spent all this time. I mean, this has been already hours of work just coming up with a rough draft, taking from my imagination. And really, I haven't used, up until this point, I haven't used any references or resources. I had looked at, and I don't want to be a hypocrite, I have looked at World of Warcraft goblins for inspiration, but for the most part, this is not the framework of a World of Warcraft goblin, such as this. Yeah, they're not even in the same category as far as anatomical correctness or likeness. I just wanted to see the facial features because I did want a pretty goblin. I wanted something that was going to separate herself, this character, from a generic goblin, which is, long nose and gnarly and unkempt and whatever else, but still keep that goblin attitude and those anatomical features as close as possible. So I redid this a lot, and eventually I did get it. And I redid her hair too. I was like, well, and I'm starting to realize that having a simpler hairstyle was probably something more pleasing to the eye. I had this thing in my head, and I've been doing a lot of self-research on character development, concept art, and creation, which was like, everyone's like, oh, you gotta have a silhouette. You gotta have a silhouette, because if you made your entire artwork black, and someone were to look at it, kind of like,
who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
individuals would be able to recognize your character just from a black silhouette. And I've watched a lot of people with very complex characters with just hair going everywhere and bits and pieces, but then I actually thought about Pokemon. I mean, Pokemon has some of the most simplistic designs. Pikachu, for example, super simple to show off the silhouette of Pikachu, and everyone knows what the silhouette of Pikachu is. Everyone knows what the silhouette of even coughing is. I mean, it's just a ball with some knobs on it, but someone would be like, oh, that's coughing. And so I actually took away from that adding complexity to a character, because that's what I was after, and I started realizing that's not it. We have to draw ourselves back and make something a little bit more tangible, a little bit more simple. And I think that might be another problem that artists have is that you just overthink it. And I am the poster child for overthinking anything. So I drew her hair much more simply, but still gave it some attitude. And as we see here, I'm actually trying to still add complexity. And I can't get out of the head space that, oh, we need to add more to this hair. We gotta do it. And so I put like this weird mullet hair tail thing. And I just was like, well, this gives flow. It's a nice flow. We'll work with it. And then I started working on the mouth. And obviously I'm trying to find a goblin mouth. I'm trying to think of what that would look like. That took a little bit to get a really cool design that I think was happy but aggressive. And the ears, I wanted a little curl at the end of the ears because I think goblin ears actually have quite a bit of personality in themselves. I think your goblin would actually have, as far as if you are creating a goblin character, even an elf character, like think about, again, I'm thinking about World of Warcraft a lot with kind of the structure of this. Think about night elves, right? Night elves, blood elves, so on and so forth. Their ears are very recognizable. They're very long. And as far as goblins are concerned, when we go into the goblin creation for goblins, we can see that there's a plethora of ears too. And truly, when you pick a set of ears for your goblin, you are really, really adding in a personality. And I really didn't think about this before. This would be part of her personality. And so I think I have much more of an appreciation for mythical creatures that have large ears or very fanciful style ears. And looking at that style of that ear and being like, huh, I think I understand the personality of this character just with their ears alone. I didn't realize that ears were such a big thing, or would be a big thing. And so now I'm actually outlining the clothing. I'm starting to think a little bit more complex though with this, because now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, right? We're getting to the more details. We need to add belts, straps, satchels. Again, she's an adventurer, so she's got leather boots, she's got maybe some armor pieces, she's got leather gloves and wraps and things like that. So I'm starting to think about the genericism of her clothing. And then now I'm working on the firearm, and the firearm itself was definitely an undertaking. And when you look at this rough draft, you're probably thinking to yourself like, oh, you came up with that design really quick. No, I didn't. Actually, because based on how you're looking at the speed drawing essentially, but I've slowed it way down so we can talk about it. No. No, that firearm took me forever to decide what I wanted to do, because I didn't know where to start, really. I mean, I'm a pretty firearm savvy individual. I've been around firearms my entire life. I trained with them. I'm very familiar with their in and outs, but I'm not really trying to bring any sense of true realism to this. This is a fantasy world. This is where things don't quite make sense. This is a place where like stuff is just very extra. And so I'm thinking, well, you know, I like revolvers. Revolvers are one of my favorite type of firearms, just because of their old schoolness and just the fact that I think they look great. And so I chose that. But then I was thinking, do I want to go with a flintlock pistol maybe? And I was like, I don't know if flintlock would be the best. And so I looked to World of Warcraft, of course, because again, I've been utilizing these examples, and I found firearms like this that kind of were like, they're there, but they're not quite there. Like, there's some really extravagant ones, of course, in World of Warcraft. And I'm just like, yeah, I think maybe that's a little too extravagant. I'm not sure. But then I thought about Sea of Thieves, and I really like how simple but complex the Sea of Thieves guns are, and that's where I drew a lot of my inspiration. Keeping, and of course now looking at how I've done this, I wanted that revolver look, I wanted to have the spikes, and then I decided to just go off the rails again with just knowing that this is so unrealistic. I decided to put this big knife, sword, bayonet underneath this just to add some extra flavor. And really, after this entire artwork is done, I feel like you'll agree with me that bayonet really does add a lot of personality to just not only the firearm, but just the overall composition of the piece. With the hair, you've seen that very briefly, which was I threw it side to side because now I'm thinking about the weight. I'm thinking about the weight of the art piece. And what do I mean the weight? The weight means how heavy is the artwork on either side of the picture. And if you look currently right now, where I've had this pause just so that we could talk about it a little bit more, the firearm adds a lot of weight to, I guess it would be the left side if you're looking at the piece of paper, right? The left side of this artwork. And because of that, well, that tail hair that I had is almost completely unnecessary now. And I was like, well, I did a lot of work on that tail piece for the hair that I really want to keep it. And so I tried to throw it on the other side because now the bomb's in the air, right? The bomb's in the air, it's there, it's adding weight to the other side, and I think it's actually very balanced. But I still didn't want to get rid of that hair piece that I worked so hard on. So I started flipping it back and forth to try and make it work. And ultimately, I got rid of it. Get it out of there. You just got to learn to just accept defeat on some things. And that even though you worked hard to create a particular piece for your character, if the balance of the artwork and the weight on the piece of paper is too shifted to one side or the other, have a distaste to it. I know this is kind of some artist lingo, ooh, but maybe you understand what I'm saying. And you are going to see the weight distribution of this artwork throughout the entirety of this piece, and we will talk about weight at the end and really kind of dive into more about that. So now I'm working on the bomb, and I decided I wanted something really cool other than just a plain old bomb. And I think before we were starting to talk about the bomb, now you see me where I was trying to put like a traditional crossbones, skull and crossbones. With how flavorful the firearm is, to have just a regular bomb in the hand was, it's just boring. Why would I want to have something that was just regular? This isn't a regular world. This is a fantasy world full of charm and craziness. I'm thinking about like fantasy objects, and essentially I just decided to make a bomb lantern. and I think it, as we see here, it turned out quite well. And now I'm starting to add more details. I'm now going over another rough draft. I'm adding even more things. I'm adding accessories. I'm adding tears to the shirt. I'm adding dynamite to the satchel in the back. I'm trying to figure out more accents. I'm trying to get more information with the clothing aspect of things. I like to say that I am like a blacksmith. I take a lump of iron and then I start molding it, put it into the fires of the forge, and then I take out the red hot metal and then I start smacking it with a hammer on the anvil, shaping this iron and shaping this steel in a way to, of course, the end result would be a sword or whatever the heck I'm trying to make, right? I do the same thing with my artwork. I try to get the basics down first, to get the thought process, put what's in my head on paper in its most basic form. And from there, I can let my imagination really run wild with ideas. Once you start putting shapes, basic layouts on your characters, you're then going to be able to add more detail as you go. And so I will layer upon layer upon layer of more detail on clothing as we go. And then as I'm adding more information to her clothing and general costume, I started working on the box more. I wanted it to be broken. I wanted it to be wood, so I'm adding these extras here. I wanted to have a TNT box, essentially, is what I wanted. And actually, I didn't really know what I wanted at first. I was actually thinking of possibly having a treasure chest, and like she was just standing on the treasure chest and maybe it was like tipped over and there was this gold pouring out. I thought about that. I thought about maybe a mimic, and like she's squishing the head on the mimic chest, and so like there's like a little bit of an indent on the chest and the mimic's like, why are you stepping on me? Something something like that. I had all sorts of things going through my head, but because she's very explosive, she just seems explosive. She seems very dynamic in this regard of haphazardness. And so coming and just adding more explosive to it just seemed to be appropriate. And so I wanted this to be something more than just a generic TNT box. I wanted to give it some personality in its own. And so I decided to put a hole in it, and that there was dynamite, and that there was dynamite clusters, I don't know, coming out from that hole to give it content, right? To put content in the box. And from there, I tried to practice with some generic wear and tear. And so and the reason why I wanted to practice with wear and tear on my rough draft was because I actually have never really did anything with wear and tear before, if that blows your mind, you know. But it's true. I have never really worked with creating truly damaged things and war-torn things, so I wanted to practice in my rough draft for that. And then as far as this is concerned, I decided, like, well, I want to add a little bit more things. I actually started thinking about maybe I want this to be kind of like a supply cache, right? Like she's grabbing all sorts of supplies from here. Maybe there is a mountain of gold behind this. Maybe there is all sorts of stuff over here. But then again, I started thinking about that weight. So I did draw a burlap sack. I did sketch on my live stream when people were talking to me about why I'm deciding to do the things that I'm doing. I started to explain things, and obviously this is why we see this pop up here on the speed draw, is because I did start to explain this right here is called a cyclic vision. Cyclic vision. Huh. I want your eyes to explore the art. I don't want you to truly be focused on one thing the entire time, because it draws away from all of the effort that I put into the art piece. I want you to recognize her expression, why I circled it. Then I want you to notice the bomb next, which is this jack-o'-lantern style bomb, which is a focal point in itself. It's not the primary focal point, because faces are, you know, the most recognizable thing, and because she is who she is, and she's clearly the main figure since she is in the middle of the artwork. She's in the middle of the page. That's where you're going to be looking first. The bomb should be probably second. Now you might go a different direction, but this is the flow I wanted. The bomb should be second, and then you should work your way down, and then you see all of these supply caches and stuff going down here in this corner, which is adding a lot of weight. Remember, I said we were going to talk about weight a little bit more. Probably mentioned it a few more times, and again, we'll talk more at the end about weight. But I added weight to the right corner. I had a lot of weight already going to the left side. Now I have weight going to the right side, and in fact, at this current point in time, I have a lot of weight on the right-hand side, which means I need to add more weight to the left side to balance it out. And so I want your focus to go down there, because there's actually a lot going on. She's got her foot on a box, the box itself, the dynamite coming out of it, the burlap sack, and something else that we're about ready to add into this, and so on. And then I circled the left side here because, again, I want you to continue forward. I want you to move your eyes along.
Move along. Move along.
So I circled that area saying I need to put something here. And now I'm just showing, oh, yes, that was a good one, is someone asked me about light sources at that point in time. And so I drew a representation of wondering about, well, my light source is just going to be top down. It's kind of like a spotlight. That's what I want, because she's in the spotlight. And so I'm going to treat this as this way. And I'm not going to add more light sources. The more and more light sources that you add to your artwork, the more complex it gets. And the more people expect you to be able to put that light source where it needs to be and how to do it. Now, can I do it? Yes, but this was already such a huge undertaking that I kept the light source very simple. Even the bomb spark up there and the soon-to-be glowing barrel of the gun have such a small light source that it does not affect any of the other objects. At least I didn't want them to affect any of the other objects that they surrounded themselves with. And so now we are actually starting to build up a secondary character. So you could say that the bomb is kind of a character in itself, right? It's got a face, it's interesting, it's recognizable, and this very well could be some sort of secondary piece, but let's face it, it's an explosive device. So it's not going to be around forever. Sorry, little bomb guy. Is what it is. However, a good secondary character, something that's living. Not saying that you can't make inanimate objects on a secondary character, but I digress to continue forward. I wanted something interesting, and when I looked at the burlap sack, I was thinking, you know what? It'd be funny if I put like a mouse or a rat or something like that may have been chewing into this burlap sack, but because she slammed her foot down, it either scared the rat or launched the rat off the box, and I think that'd be pretty funny. And so now I'm trying to figure out what position, because now I'm developing another character. So now I gotta figure out a pose for this character, an expression, and everything I've been doing with this goblin chick. I'm now gonna do it again for a secondary character. Oh my goodness. I gave myself so much work to do. And so as you see here, I drew perspective lines with this rat. I then created an expression, and I started working on the rat itself, and then just coming up with this utterly goofy little guy. And luckily, it really didn't take me too long to do it, so I'm proud of myself that it didn't take me too long to create this small secondary character that adds more movement to the art piece, especially in this corner where there's all inanimate objects. Essentially, just give a little extra character and personality, and I think the rat does a really good job of being a very good accent piece. This isn't really a secondary character per se, more so than a environmental... what would you call it? An environmental anomaly? I like that word, so we're just gonna work with it. And because of the movement, it also draws your eyes into that section as well. And again, I just personally believe that rat really spiced it up a little bit. It also added to the personality of this artwork, which and this character design, which is what I'm really after. Everything I want this to do, everything that I'm encompassing, is adding to the personality of this character. And so her stomping her foot down and scaring little creatures, absolutely her personality. I then started to draw another bomb because it's a supply cache of some sort, and I think it would have been cool to show a lit version of the bomb, which is going to be in her hand, and then a non-lit version, so that way people could actually see that there is dynamics in even the inanimate objects throughout this art piece and in this world I'm creating. And then from there, I put down shells that came from the firearm itself and started to kind of get an idea of the smoke that I want to do, because I do want to add some movement to the firearm. As you're noticing this, I'm adding movement to almost everything I'm doing. She herself has movement. The bomb in her hand has movement because there's sparks that are going to be coming off of it. The rat is the movement in that lower right-hand corner of this art piece. And then in the left, the smoking shell casings and the barrel of the gun are going to be the movement on the left side of the art piece. Again, weight. I'm thinking about the weight of the artwork. After the shell casings, I'm like, well, there's a lot going on to this right-hand side, right? We have another bomb, we got the TNT crate with the dynamite, we got the rat and the burlap sack. I mean, that's a lot. Plus her foot, I guess you could say, too. There's a lot going on the right-hand side. So what am I going to do to put that weight on the left-hand side as well? And I was like, you know what? A dead man's leg. There's a smoking gun, there's the shell casings, and so we got a dead man's leg just hanging out there, which adds, of course, again, to her personality, where she's obviously not afraid to do what needs to be done to get the job done type of deal, right? Like, she's ready to go. And whether that means that, like, maybe she's in like a mercenary type of character, adventurer, whatever. The imagination can run free and wild with this entire thing. You could really make her whatever you really wanted to be. And I think that's also something cool, is, funnily enough, she not only could be a main character herself, but she also could be a great companion character, and or even an NPC, I guess, but more so main character, and at the very least, a side character for a comic book or a series or something like that. That's what was going through my head. I didn't really know how to draw a foot in that position before. I really had to look at a reference of a shoe in that perspective. And of course, as far as that's concerned, finding a shoe in that perspective was incredibly hard until I realized I have a pair of shoes. And so I held up a shoe. I was like, that's how that looks. I'm telling you, you gotta use your references, and I understand too that this is something that's hard for artists to do, because we want to be able to just throw what's in our head on a piece of paper and call it a day and be like, I made the Mona Lisa from my head. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, there's only 1% of artists that can do that, and that's not me or you. Well, maybe it is you. If it is you, let me know in the comments below. But use your references, and also just start thinking outside of the box on your references too. Don't scour the web all the time and be like, where's this perspective? A 3/4 upward viewpoint of shoe 3D model. Or something like that. And yes, I did type that out. Just think about it real quick. It's a shoe. You have a pair of shoes. Go grab the pair of shoes and look at it in the perspective that you're using it in. There you go. Just start thinking about those things. I am redrawing the perspective because I was a dippity-doo and I deleted the first perspective that I worked on for that box. So then I had to now make a second perspective because since I deleted it, I now have to redo it and do it again, and hopefully I get close enough. So I used the box itself to create this new perspective line. And the reason why I did this is because I want to make a wood floor. And now my whole idea for this is this actually came after I started putting all these pieces in. I didn't actually have this planned from the beginning. It started after I started putting pieces into this art piece. And I started thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? This is starting to look more like one of those dioramas. I'm sure that you've seen a diorama before, and if not, of course, I'm showing one on the screen now. And so what you're basically taking, what a diorama is you're taking a slice of life. That's what it is. You're taking a cube and you're pulling it out of the ground, or a circle or a sphere or whatever, and you're pulling it out of the ground, and you got a tree with it, you got a squirrel with it, you got some flowers and a butterfly, and then there's nothing else around it, because now you've floated this little piece of island, this floating island in the sky. And this is what a diorama is, especially if you're doing it on a canvas like this is. And that is how I started imagining it. So once I put the TNT down, I didn't start realizing this until probably the burlap sack and the rat and stuff. I was like, you know what? I think a diorama would be kind of cool. And then again, this is such a frontier for me in my artwork. Check my Instagram. You'll see that I have never done anything like this ever before. I have never went to this scale of items, accessories, secondary characters, weapon systems, and then ultimately an environment that is really captivating and something that you might be interested in, and of course would bring interest to me. Obviously, I'm the primary audience. I want to do this for my own satisfaction, as any artist should always do their artwork for their own satisfaction, and that when they share it with other people, whether you get a round of applause or you get boo, it doesn't matter. So long as you're happy with your artwork, nothing else matters. And so I wanted to figure out, well, what do I want to do? And it was really quick. I was like, well, maybe she's like in a tavern and she got into like a fight or something like that, or she's on a ship or anything. And I'm like, you know what? If I just draw wood planks, I'll let you decide where this little bit of life got lifted from. Maybe she is on the deck of a pirate ship. Maybe she is in a tavern. Maybe she's somewhere else. Maybe she's inside of a house. I don't know. I'm going to let you have that imagination. And so, of course, I'm adding details. I'm adding holes and all sorts of things in the wood grain. I'm adding nails. I'm adding all sorts of stuff that would make this a floor. And then I went through and essentially put that floor somewhere. I resized it to make it make sense to some degree and just kind of let it lay where it lay. And then, of course, I started erasing everything that was over top of that wood, because that's what you got to do. And, oh, man, you did all that work on that wood piece and you're erasing stuff. This is another thing that artists, and I think Bob Ross taught this a lot too, which was you got to go over top of your artwork. You have to be willing to do the work but then go over top of it with something else to create depth and perception. And yes, you are destroying your artwork, right? You're getting rid of it. It's going away. It's never coming back again. And you could say, well, that was useless. It's not. And the reason why it's not is, one, it keeps you sharp. It makes you continue to understand the fundamentals of creating what you want to create. And then thirdly, people can imagine it. They can imagine that continuity of your art piece. They can imagine the planks continuing behind the TNT and the other stuff that's on the ground there, or behind her foot, because since you drew all of it, people can imagine the rest of it that isn't there. So always draw what you want to draw, and never be afraid to go over top of it and delete it, or never show it. Let it happen. Just let it happen. And you will find yourself in a much more easy and simpler life with your art. And so now we get to the final line art. I am satisfied with everything that has happened. In final line art, sometimes I will change things here and there, but I'm very particular with my line art. I pride myself as a line artsman above all other things. And so I ensure the accuracy of my lines. I ensure that everything is connected. Everything is doing exactly what I want it to do. I'm adding things as it's necessary, altering things as necessary, because nothing is final until I do the final line art. And so, as you can see, I even added some extra stuff. I added the bandage, I added some extra stripes. I decided to do fishnets on her glove here, and adding those accents and details and seam lines and stitches and wrapping, and these are just a few of my favorite things. Working on the buckle more, getting some cracks and things in the armor, and rips and tears in her shorty shorts, of which actually I shortened them up. I didn't realize I was being so conservative. I had her shorts like kind of like down, you know, down here or something like that, close to her knee. And I was like, well, yeah, that looks like a pair of booty shorts. I was wrong. I was so wrong. That wasn't booty shorts. Because I was like, well, what I'm trying to make is a pair of Daisy Dukes, right? All I could say is viewer discretion advised. I just typed in Daisy Dukes, and I was like, oh, wow. And I looked at my Goblin. I looked at the Daisy Dukes, looked back at the Goblin, like, girl. You get you some show it song, girl. We going for it. So I cut the shorts down, and I'm glad I did, to be honest with you. They look so much better on her when I shorten them up. And this isn't so much a sexual thing or anything like that, no. It's a design thing, and that was what I was trying to design. And so I was like, well, that looks a ton better. That's so much more pleasing to the eye as far as a costume is concerned, and it just also so happens to be pleasing in other respects to someone's eyeballs. And I was actually able to have more fun with it. I got to add some more meat to them legs, and then I also was able to increase the strap on her right leg's sock there, the whatever the hell you want to call it, the thigh-high sock with the little garter strip and strap. I got to have more fun. Dude, I love straps. Straps are my favorite thing to work with. And so the fact that I just gave myself more strap work, I was so happy. So happy. And so I'm adding straps to the boots, I'm adding boot plats, and then I'm getting like this idea, of course, that the whole boot thing itself was phenomenal. I gave her like these high heel gob stompers, man. Like, I just wanted this very unique boot, but something that would be believable. And that's something too I think it's really hard to accomplish, which is, yes, this is a fantasy world. Yes, this is just over-the-top fantasy in some way. And I go to like an 80-20 perspective. 80% of it is fantasy, but 20% of it is reality. Or realistic enough, realism enough to be convincing. And that's what you really want to do as a fantasy artist, is you want to have 80% of it be like, this would never exist in our world, which is good. But 20% of it should be, yeah, I could see that. existing in our world. That's what you're after as a fantasy artist. And so I gave her these high heel, gobstomp, huge tread boots with some spikes, big straps, and big strings and stuff like that, that someone actually could make this. All right, this is a cosplay that can happen. Someone can make a cosplay of her. Easy. I say easy, but I'm just saying that it's not impossible. And that's the point. It's not impossible for this to happen. It's just not going to in most respects. So then I'm working on the fine-tuned details of the revolver, getting the metal bits done, the screws, the blade better. I decided to redo the spikes. I was really having a good time weathering the stone because it's a stone wrap that's around her, that revolver. Adding steel bits and adding pieces, I think it's called greeblies. Yes, they're called greeblies, which is adding small things that give detail to larger things. And the pistol is actually pretty large. And so adding like some bolts, nuts, and things here, and again, I do have a lot of firearm knowledge, so I know that, well, in that little brass tip at the end of the handle there should probably be a couple of screws that hold in that brass plate. There should be a pin over here, should be a screw over there, and this is actually something you need to think about too in this realistic stuff, this 20% of realism, right? How does this function? How would this actually hold together? And how does this connect, right? A lot of people, I believe, when they create an item in their artwork, they don't really think about how does this connect? How do you wear it? How does it snap onto you? Like, how is this cape not flying away? How is this gun not falling apart, right? Because you have nothing that shows that there's at least something there that's screwed in or nailed in or clamped together. A lot of the time, even with the biggest professionals out there, don't think about adding snaps, nails, rivets, screws, whatever, to their characters' clothing and accessories for it to make sense. I think it not only adds much more depth and detail, but it really shows the kind of person you are with your artwork. Because if you can show this stuff and people are like, and if they even care, of course, you're also betting on the general public to give a shit about this, to look in deep into your artwork and be like, wow, they actually thought about that. That's pretty freaking cool. And in my personal respects, and anybody I look at, right, any artist that I look at from here on, I'll look for those things. And I have an even more respect for that artist to even give two shits about adding a rivet here and there or a screw here and there. So, needless to say, I worked on the bark. So there's like a bark that surrounds the barrel, and getting that iron sight done, and just adding to the revolver and just giving the revolver its own personality. Now I'm working on the rat and the burlap sack and stuff. I actually decided to add that chew hole with the grains coming out. Again, adding a story. It's almost like a second story to this art piece, which is the rat was doing its own thing, and it's this living, breathing world is what I'm really capturing, and I'm only capturing a small section of it. And I think a lot of you probably would be like, show me more. I want to know more about this world. Where does she belong? Where does she live? Are there other goblins like her? She's the only one like that. Show me more. And that's what I want to think too. I want to be able to show more, because that just gives me more things to do and more things to draw down the road. But I will tell you, this undertaking here wore me out. I couldn't even tell you how many hours. This is probably a 13 to 20 hour art piece. So now I'm doing the final on the box and getting the more details, adding scrapes and chunks missing out of the wood and holes and things like that, adding weathering. Again, this is the first time I've really dived deep. I dove deep into it. To weathering something like this, and then adding wood grain and stuff like that. And then now I'm working on the action part of the boot, and I didn't know how exactly I wanted to show the action. And ultimately, as you'll see, keep it simple, stupid. Just keep it simple, stupid. But first I wanted to figure out what would be the most best visual to make this happen. And a lot of times you'll see like the shadow of the boot up high and then the normal boot, which causes a way of movement essentially, and then movement lines, as you see here. Played with that idea, and I really like these movement lines, and you'll ultimately know that I came up with the movement lines afterwards. And then I started playing with like the actual like cartoony slam. And unfortunately, this didn't work for this. And as you see me playing around with like a ring and stuff and just kind of doing whatever there to show some sort of stomp animation, right? Like just the traditional comic book stomp stuff. And no matter what I was doing, it never came out right. It didn't look right. It didn't look like where it belonged. It didn't belong there. And so you start to realize that, yeah, you have this idea in your head, but when you execute it and you actually put it on paper, no pun intended, it doesn't belong there. This isn't that kind of artwork. This isn't that cartoony. Yes, this is a cartoon per se, but this is much more elaborate than that. This is something where the only way I could really show off that stomp is by altering the objects around her, showing like a divot, like we talked about earlier about like showing a divot in the mimic's chest, right? Because it's a living object, and so it would have been funny. But showing that the box was affected, and like there's bits and pieces coming off of the box, and then stuff like that, and showing more elaborate line work. And that's just, I was already this far deep, and I wasn't going to go back through and alter it. Sometimes you do just have to call it, you know, and just say it is what it is and just drive forward. So I settled for just those action lines there, and I think those in itself were plenty. And even if you don't notice it in the artwork until I just explained it to you, they're there. I was happy that they were there, and that's it. And so continuing forward, finishing up the shoe there, and then starting on finalizing all of the woodwork and stuff like that with the floored panels, and adding those additional details, adding the wood grain in. And I don't normally go over my line work all that religiously. I pretty much just use it as an idea. Your final draft is just that. It's an idea. It's not to be your final, right? That's why I color in blue or draw in blue. I draw in blue because I know that this isn't what I really want it to be. This is the idea. This is the blueprint, funnily enough, of what I'm wanting this to turn into. And then, like I said, when I finally decide to put black on this paperwork and go back through it, that's when I'm going to make my final alterations. And sometimes my blue line work is fine. And so my black line art, my final line art over top of it, will follow it one for one. But there are also, and actually many more of the time, where my blue line art is just a suggestion, and then my final line art, I will realize what I wanted realized at that point in time. And so, and now I'm actually adding the chat bubbles. There's so much weight on the bottom now. There's a ton of weight on the bottom, right? Like, we got a floor, we got shells, we got a dead man's leg, we got dynamite, we got a box, we got a rat, we got a burlap sack, we got a bomb, and we got half of her body, and even the bayonet blade, right? Even the bayonet blade is sitting down there a little bit on the bottom, and that's a lot of weight. That's a ton of weight. Now, that being said, this still works out just fine because, again, she's a primary focus, and even though she's elevated in the air, I was like, well, this could work, but now I'm starting to think about this a little bit more, and I'm like, you know what? This is kind of like a comic illustration. Like, you'd flip through a comic book, and then you'd have like an introduction to a character, right? You'd have that nice glossy page inside of the comic book that's all black and white and paper, right? And you'd see a little comic blurb, bubbles and stuff with the sayings and things, and I think it adds a lot, and I've never really played with that either. And so I was like, you know what? I think I can even add more personality to our goblin chick here by giving her a saying, by having her talk a little bit, and that way you, the reader, can add your own voice and do whatever, and imagine how she's saying this sentence. And of course, words, and wordsmithing is its own art form. And so I'm obviously trying to put words on here. You know, I got ya, the 3 things any of you guys will ever need, right? So even saying that, like, it's kind of like this Boston accent, or what was going through my head is like, what's a goblin accent? And so, you know, like, I'm thinking of World of Warcraft, like, you know, time is money, friend. I got you the 3 things any of you guys will ever need. Bullets, bombs, and babes. Well, I'm the only babe, so what'll I have to do? This was what was going through my head when I decided to make this. And I thought it was something that was very goblin-like, added to that spicy personality, and I think anybody who would view this would find it flavorable. And now, to the coloring. Oh my god. The coloring. If the line art wasn't enough of a project, I could have left it just like this. Nice black and white. Could have just, everyone would be like, oh, that's great. That's great. Just don't worry about, don't color it, man. Don't color it. Yeah, I colored it. Of course I'm going to color it. This is really, in my personal perspective, a milestone in my art. This is absolutely an achievement. It really is. This is the best illustration work I've ever done in my life. And so I want to do my best on both fronts, which is my line artsmanship, which I don't think any of you can disagree that it's not good or whatever, and if you do, I don't care what you say. This is really good line art. And so I wanted to do my best coloring as well. And so we start with skin and skin tones and figuring out the shadows, because again, the light's supposed to be coming up from above and down. And so I'm trying to make sure that the basics of the shadows are where they need to be believable. When we work with shadows and lights, that's kind of the thing. We just want it to be believable. And then you also start seeing me do soft shading, which is I make hard shades like you've seen, but then I will go ahead and use a blur tool, and I'll blur those lines. And the reason being, and I've actually explained this in live stream before doing this as well, is when an object has shading, it should be soft. It shouldn't be a hard light if you're going for semi-realism, which is what this is. This is cell shading. This is a hybrid form of cell shading. So, her skin is its own object, right? Her skin is her own object. So therefore, anything that's just skin and it's being shaded should be soft. However, if there's an object that is interacting with another object, the shading should be hard shades. And you will actually see this with her band over here. If you look at the ribbon that's going over her leg that's propped up on the box, you'll see that like shark fin shade there. That's a hard shade because it's an object interacting with another object. And so this is, of course, this is my light theory, right? This is my light theory. This might not be your light theory, but that's how I imagine those things to be, and that's how it works in real life too. Just look at some shadows on the wall. And then, oh man, I wasn't satisfied enough with her skin. This isn't some generic anime girl with generic skin and generic things. No, this is a goblin. And I'm starting to think like goblins should be unique in some way, shape, or form. And I started thinking about skin patterns. I thought about stripes. I thought about freckles and stuff, which I did give her one beauty mark on her right cheek there, as you can see by her grin. But I was like, well, how about an interesting, like, not so much scale. This isn't supposed to be scales, but some sort of like scale-like skin pattern. And I really like this idea because it adds interest to the character design itself. And I think her skin and just her general makeup and now design has even been more amplified. And so now I'm working on the hair, getting the basic shadows down, spending that time with gradients and shine and all that other fun stuff. And as you notice, I always work with a brunette color, and I will then tonal correct it for any color you want. And this is something too that digital artists also have to realize if you're a beginner digital artist is you can use any color you want. Whatever color you want, so long as it is a color. You cannot use grayscale, so pure white to pure black, and then all the grays in between, the 50 shades of gray in between. That's not going to help you with this. That's a whole different type of coloring. Yes, you can color in grayscale. If you want to learn about grayscale coloring, let me know in the comments below. But so long as you have any sort of color in the palette that you're using, you can tonal correct it to be any color you want. The world is your oyster. So long as you stick with your lighting theory, shading, and so on and so forth, it will look good. And I think this is a testament to that. And believe me, I will be going over all the tools and stuff of the trade as well in future videos. So the most important tools for a digital artist. And so just finishing up and doing the more detailed work on the eyes and a little bit of purple eyeshadow. I really loved how her eyes turned out. Her teeth, giving them a little bit of a yellow look because, well, let's be real. But let's just be real. No one has perfect white teeth. And if they do, they're fake. Then I did her nails. Oh my god, yes, queen. This Gabo chick, if you don't know, I'm gonna zoom in right here. Yeah, that's right, I did her nails. Absolutely. Just because she's a haphazard, crazy goblin chick doesn't mean that she can't have delicious nails. And I think they're pretty basic, but needless to say, I gave her an, what is it, a manicure? Yes, I gave her a manicure. And so I added some shine to it, gave her a little bit gloss on them nails, just fun things there. So then I start working on the accessories on her ears, her earrings, and then I just start going down from there. I usually start from the top and go down. I worked on her collar, and then the little tag that says Bad Gob. If you didn't notice what it said, that's what it says. It says Bad Gob. Working on metal. I love making things look metal. Then I want to do like this retro shirt thing. So my first and primary focus was getting the shading done right, and then the lighting, and then adding another color and get the lighting done with that, and then obviously working with the vibrancy of the colors, the saturation essentially, and working on the undershirt, so it's like a kind of like a two-piece shirt. And then I worked on the armor pieces and the ribbon, and as you see, I put some flashing at the back there. And this is something too that digital artists, this is completely stylized choice. You don't have to do this, but I think it adds a lot of depth to your artwork, because when we look at things from really far away, right, the further and further something goes away from you, the less detail you see, and the more foggy it gets. You see that bluish gray tone, that the more foggy it gets, the further away it gets from you. So if you notice, and I'm gonna whoop, you notice that ribbon there, because that other ribbon is going towards the back behind my character, it's starting to fade out of existence because it's going away from the main focus. It's becoming more into the background. It's going away. And because it's going away, I add a light blue-gray flash is what it's called. It's flashing to show off that that has not only movement to it, that it's fading away from existence. It's fading into the background. And so as a character design artist and someone who wants to show depth into their character designs, that's something you might want to take into consideration when you are creating your piece. Again, really the coloring aspect of things is kind of a no-brainer at this point in time. We're just adding the shades, we're adding the color, we're adding the depth and dimension, we're making sure that we soft shade the object itself, if it itself is shaded, and then hard shading anything that is acting upon those objects. And then as far as the jeans were concerned, the booty shorts, pretty simple. I did add some texture. You can kind of see that right now. I'm texturing it a little bit just to kind of give it like a more of a cloth feel. And that's something too that you need to take into consideration is what kind of material you're working with. Are you working with leather, cloth? In a lot of aspects, these things work in the same way. There is highlights, there are lighter and brighter and shaded parts on jeans just as much as a leather coat. However, leather tends to be more shiny, definitely refracts more light than absorbs it like clothing does, or linens for that matter. So when you are doing something with leather, it wants to be more lit. than a piece of cloth will. And when you obviously work with something metal, you definitely want to add a ton of shine and a ton of contrasting colors to make it look like it's a piece of metal. So if you want to learn how to do any of these things, metalwork, straps, leather, cloth, hair, whatever, let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to make videos. That just makes content for everybody, right? And then just kind of giving her stocking. Her stocking was supposed to be kind of leather-like. And so you can see where there's a really nice, good shine line right down the middle of that stocking there. And I feel like that gives off the vibe of it being leather-like or latexy or whatever. Then from here, I'm working on the boots, just doing the generic stuff, doing the boot pleats. Again, when it comes to coloring everything, you get into a flow aspect, especially when you know how to color the way that you color. That might be a strange thing to say, but you'll know, any experienced artist out there will understand that. When you know how to color something, you just kind of get into a rhythm and you just do it. You don't think about it, you just kind of go for it. And all of your pieces, and including this piece here, all of my pieces of clothing and items and things follow the same suit of coloring style: a base color, a light shadow, a dark shadow, sometimes a super dark shadow, then highlight and major highlight, like a almost pure white, and then some flashing. And that's kind of what happens with that, as far as that's my coloring style. Again, it's a hybridization of cell shading, which is anime style cell shading with semi-realism. And I kind of throw it in there together and it creates something like this. And then to give the example, here's the bomb that we're working on now. And this is how I kind of make metal or super plasticky parts, the stuff that really carries a lot of shine and refraction of light all the way around it. This is kind of how I do it. I add waves, I add shine everywhere, and I fade it in. I like do a soft erase of those things. I will then let that just kind of speak for itself. And that's much more complex than anything that we've been doing at this current point in time. When we go to metalwork, it's a whole new ball game. The reason being is because you do have to think about light, and you do have to think about, and no matter what style you choose, right, to do metalwork in, it's got to be convincing that whatever it is that you're trying to say that's metal, someone's gonna be like, yeah, that's metal. And then so now I add a glow to the bomb and giving it like that jack-o'-lantern feel, because again, this one's going to be lit, and so therefore it's going to have a glow from the inside and then the sparks out there. And now this is something I decided to do, and I actually did this by accident. I was looking at other examples of like jack-o'-lanterns and other things that have like a glowy smile to them, and there was one jack-o'-lantern that I ran into, and I probably won't find the example to show you, but needless to say, it had a normal jack-o'-lantern mouth, but it had these holographic teeth inside of it, and I was like, that is such a cool idea, because it really, really does give such a huge personality of having actual teeth. So like this bomb has like 2 sets of teeth. It's got like the cracked smile, which is like its own set of teeth, but then it actually has like light teeth inside. Like they're not real, they're just made of light. And I thought it was such a cool idea, and so I threw it in there, and it's mwah, chef's kiss. And so now I'm going to the firearm at this point in time. I got the hammer done on it, then the cylinder for the cycling of the rounds, and just giving these basic takes. Now granted, and working on brass bits, and while I'm working on all this steel and metal, I was trying to figure out how complex do I actually make it. And you'll see where I actually go away from when I work on the bluing of the actual upper receiver. So I start with like brown and stuff, and I looked at a lot of blued firearms like this, and I was like, well, I'm going to try and emulate that as best as possible. And I kind of got close with this, but it seemed not right. I just couldn't get it right. I didn't know really what I was doing. And so I erased it and I went over something else, and I made it much more simple. And even then, though, when I found out, like, even with my more simple version of doing the case, I started redoing it even more. And I went back through again. I did that case like 3 or 4 times. because I couldn't get it right. As you see here, I just couldn't get it right. And eventually it's just one of those things where you have to say in your head, just keep it simple, stupid. Just keep it simple. I was trying to do something too complex, especially for the kind of art that we're at right now, for something that doesn't need to be complex. So just keep it simple. And so that's what I did. I kept it simple, and I was able to move on from it. Did the wood part, put wood grain onto the wood there, did some fading, just a lot of gradients with this, just to kind of give wood that idea, because there's a lot of refracting light off of wood too. Even though it's not metal, it still has a lot of things that a lot of light that bounces off the bark and things like that. And then I'm really good. Hey, I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back. Okay, I am really good at making blades, and so making the bayonet was something that I had a lot of confidence in, and was just like, let's just go to town. Like, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew there was a few things that changed because I don't really make serrated blades like this too much, and so I knew that there was going to be extra shine where I wouldn't normally have shine on a blade like this, so I did have to do some extra work there. Then getting the stonework done with the band that goes across the revolver, and then working on the spikes. Now, the funny thing is, this is the first instance of you seeing what grayscale coloring is. And so if you want to learn how to grayscale color, let me know in the comments below. I did those spikes in a pure white to black grayscale with no color saturation whatsoever. And then I started to play, because I know my values and my gradients and stuff like that. I decided to use a gradient tool to add color to my grayscale. And I discovered a really cool orange color that I didn't even think about putting on this firearm, to really give it even more personality. Again, I'm making this firearm like just this weird haphazard put together thing that doesn't look very dangerous. You know, it almost looks like a toy gun in some respects. And that was something I was thinking about, was this looks like a toy gun. I think people won't take her very seriously. But as we see with the dead man's leg in the bottom there, you probably should take her a little bit more serious, even if she doesn't act serious. Continuing forward, I grayscaled, gradiented the color of the spikes, and then now I'm working on the barrel of the gun itself, adding some heat to it because it just got fired. So like it gets super hot, the barrel got super hot. I did another grayscale for that iron sight, and I matched up the color to the spikes. I wanted them to match. And then I wanted to start making the smoke detail. The smoke detail that comes out of the front of the barrel of the firearm here. Again, showing and proving that it was just fired, and so I had a lot of fun with this smoke too. I looked at some examples of smoke, like just kind of wisping in the air, and so I seen where there's like lights and darks, and there's like almost like two different kinds of smoke coming out, and so I just kind of really played around with it. And smoke is smoke, right? It kind of just behaves wildly on its own, and so I kind of just let my lasso tool, my brush tool, I just kind of did it haphazardly. I didn't even have any thought process of like, oh yeah, that needs to go there like this. I didn't think about that. I just kind of let it go. It's on its own way. Just keeping in mind that, of course, smoke rises, and so therefore, so long as it's going upward in some direction, should be just fine. And then now I started working on the bomb sparks, of which then I added a glow effect, and I, as you've seen there, I tried to do different smoke things, and I seen where smoke, like from a cigarette, is 100% different than smoke coming off of a sparking fuse. And so I actually have two different types of smoke coming off of the bomb and the firearm, because it would be two different types of smoke. And then now I'm trying to work up glow effects on the bomb, and I just ultimately, you know what? I don't want to work with another light source. As I said, the more light sources that you add to your art, the more complex things get. The moment I realized that I'm putting beams coming out of the eyes and mouth of this bomb, that I'm probably going to have to add particular lighting sources on her skin, on her hand, on her fingers, and stuff like that. I'm like, nope. Not even going to worry about it. Not even going to worry about it. And so I didn't. And then now I'm down at the bottom here. I'm adding details and the shading and the coloring. Very basic for the burlap sack. And as you notice, I'm putting the light on top and I'm putting the shadow on the bottom. I gave it some detail. And I still use that flashing though, because it's starting to fade off to the right. So it got that light gray blue flashing to just show that that is not really a main piece. It's not really a main focus. It's drifting off to the background. So there you go. Working on the rat, that took a little bit of time because again, it is a secondary character. So therefore it needs to have a little attention to detail. And even though in the final art piece, unless I make a poster of this, and hey, if you want this to be made into a print, let me know in the comments below. So I gave it extra time to go through and make sure the shadows were right, make sure the colors were right, and that I just put my best foot forward for this little secondary character down here. So that way, again, if people do notice it and want to talk about it and look at it, that it actually is a decently detailed little character. The eyeballs in particular were really fun to work with on this guy because they're just bulging out of his head, so he's got like bloodshot eyes and stuff. It was actually really fun doing something this kooky. And so now I'm working on the TNT box, and this also gave me a bunch of trouble because I obviously know how I want to color the box, which is putting all the color on it, a base coat as you see here. And then with that base coat, though, it was a little bit of a journey because there were so many spots I had to fill up that it just took time. And then now I have my initial shade. I mean, the box itself turned out great, but I don't want it to be a normal box. So now, after shading it the way I wanted it shaded, I have to figure out how to give it like this paint job, because TNT boxes, like if we ever seen Crash Bandicoot or really any other video game or anything for that matter, TNT boxes are red, and that's part of the danger, right? Like Minecraft and Crash Bandicoot and all of them, right? They have red TNT boxes. And so I wanted that too, but obviously since we're going for a semi-realistic look for this in some way, shape, or form, although it is more cartoon than anything, well, I wanted to paint it. And so I tried multiple times on weathered paint on this box, since the box is supposed to be weathered itself. I just did something that made it look decent, and even then I still faded it to a brownish, reddish color afterwards because it was too loud. I couldn't work it. So hey, that's just the failings I had. Again, you just have to realize when to just move on and understand that you got as far as you got and be proud that you got as far as you got and just move on. And then now I got the TNT, I typed it out and then I weathered that in, but I wanted it still visible so that way people could still read TNT. And now we're working on the dynamite. It's the same old song and dance. Again, when you get to the point of just understanding the fundamentals of how you color and shade as an artist, you will always do this all the time, and it won't even be a question of how to do it. You just know what to do. It's hard to say and hard to teach and hard to explain when you get to a point in your art career or life and journey, and no matter what hobby you're in, where you can't even really explain it to people because it's just become such a part of your nature that you just know what to do. I do plan to make tutorial videos and really do explain this stuff to you and understand how I get to the subject so that way you understand exactly how these things are formed, how I do them. And then I'm moving on to the bomb and the little unlit bomb there. He still has teeth, he still has eyes, he just doesn't glow. Then the shell casings. And at this point, things are going to be pretty simple because they are just supposed to be in the background. They're not really something to be focused on at all or too much. You're just supposed to acknowledge its existence and then move on. And the same thing with the dead man's leg. You know, basic shadowing, basic understanding of where the light sources are, and then just adding in that color. And then the floor, same concept. You just understand where the shadows should be, where everything goes. This took a little while, kind of like the box, because there's so many nooks and crannies and places for white spots to hide that it takes a while to put that base coat on. But now that you see here, this floor has a lot of depth to it. You want to know why? You probably see why. I darkened the whole outside, right? I made it where, again, she's in the spotlight. So underneath of her is actually the lightest part on this floor because that's where the primary light source is coming from. And so I darkened the entire out ring. I did like a circular out ring for the floor. And then as you notice, the furthest away planks have light blue gray flashing to it to denote that it is losing detail. It's starting to go into the fog of the distance. and it creates a ton of depth. And then this was actually my favorite part. This whole thing, this was my favorite part, is adding the cast shadows. So we've added shadows this whole time, right? Well, a cast shadow is how an object truly interacts with another object. Now, did I do this for everything? No. I only did it for the main source. So, the rat, it has a cast shadow. The burlap sack has a cast shadow. The TNT box has a cast shadow. The TNT bundles and the bomb in the background have a cast shadow. The dead man's leg has a cast shadow. Her boot has a cast shadow on the TNT box. And then she herself has a cast shadow over top of the floor, the shell casings and everything. And my goodness, when I did that, and funnily enough, go back through my artwork. I'll prove it. I have never done this before. I have never put a cast shadow on the ground for, I don't think, anything I've ever done. You can fact check me on myself, because maybe I did, but I don't think I've ever done it to this level. And it is so good. It felt so good to put such a simple thing in this artwork that just makes everything pop. Like even the little rat shadow that you see in the bottom right hand corner here, it just makes it look like the rat is jumping away from the diorama. Like it's like you're holding the diorama and then the little rat just jumps off and you're like, oh shit, well, there went the rat. From here, I wanted to add something to the background, because with as much detail and work and effort that I have put into this so far, having a true white background with the comic strip just really wasn't in the itinerary. And so I basically duplicated my entire Goblin chick, and then I made her more transparent, made her huge, and then put her in the background. And I know that's something a lot of people do with their character designs, and so I wanted to do that too. Needless to say, my computer did not like that. My computer was like, oh dear God, what are you doing? What? Oh, do you realize how much information this is to process? Stop the madness. I seen like smoke bellowing out of my computer like it was going crazy. My poor computer. And I didn't think about it, but it is a lot of information. I just asked it to duplicate this entire art piece as far as the goblin, the bomb, and the revolver, and then supersize it, render it, and then tone it down to make it transparent. Yeah, clearly my computer did not like that one bit. So the last thing now is working on something else. I wanted to add that one last piece de la resistance, and I was like, you know what? I want to name her. A character like this deserves a name. And I remember one of the names I gave my World of Warcraft character, Goblins, was Fizzy-Pop. And I think that is a cool Goblin name. And Goblin names kind of work that way, I guess at least in World of Warcraft they work that way. I wanted that kind of name thing where like who they are and their personality kind of speaks to what they're named. And so I was like, well, she's all about bang, boom, explosion, and she's also got this ambitious, rambunctious attitude and so on and so forth, so Fizzy-Pop, and there we go. And so I worked out a custom design, I did the border, I did everything myself. So that is a custom font job for Fizzy-Pop, and I will tell you this, making your own font is stupid hard. You may think it's easy. Yeah, you graffiti artists out there, yeah, you think it's easy. It's not. It isn't, because you have to follow that same style for every single letter you make. And so the first letter you make, oh yeah, of course, the first letter is always the easiest one because you just made it and it's the first letter of the font. The second letter, not so much. And then the third and the fourth and the fifth. And you're just like, huh, how do I keep this uniform, but at the same time looks like it's the same font? Again, it's incredibly difficult, and anybody who works with letters and custom letters like this, you have all my respect. And essentially, that's it. Conclusion to this. Like I said, this was an incredible journey. Hours and hours. I mean, I think I have probably 14 hours of just live streaming this, if not more, probably way more, of live streaming this, so that way people who wanted to see this process got to see it as much as they wanted. But I obviously did stuff off stream too, because it's just one of those things where I can't stream all the time. I can't get to put myself up online and let everybody see the entire process from step 1 to step 1000. I just can't. Not until I get monetized and actually start making decent money from YouTube and stuff like that, and other resources such as Twitch and Instagram, you know, all the places that you can find me on. Links in the description below for my Twitch and Instagram page. I really wanted to put my best foot forward, and the biggest part about this was not only did I want to do something that I'd never done before, but I also wanted to see where I was at as an artist. I wanted to know all of the self-teaching and research and shit that I've done over the years, and especially my most recent these last 2 years. Because for the most part, I think most artists and people in general could probably align with this. We put the things that we enjoy on the back burner much and more of the time. I'm the 99%. Right? I have a job that I must go to, I must work, I pay my taxes, the same old song and dance as 99% of the rest of the world, right? We just have a lot of things we gotta do in life, and so the things that we like to do in life, we just don't have time for. Whether we want to or not, we just can't get to it. And so artwork has really been, unfortunately for me, something I just had to put on the back burner for many years of my life. But I've had circumstance in life that has revitalized that. And even though I am working as much as I'm working, I'm doing my best to not only become a better artist, but to share the experiences with all of you. And in hopes, it is in hopes at some point in time that if I can get monetized, if I can get to do my dream, that I can help teach more people and show off more artwork and learn new styles and teach people how to conduct themselves in character concept design and so on and so forth, and just that's what I want to do in life. That's just what I want to do in life, and I'm making the most of it, and I have no regrets because at least I'm doing it, right? And I think I can say that more so than most other people. At least I'm doing it. There's a lot of folks out there, and probably including yourself, that still have put the things that you love and enjoy on the back burner because you have other priorities in life. That, or you've lost complete motivation because even if you do have the time now, that's it, right? You're just like, maybe I'll get to it, maybe I won't. And which of course means you never get to it. But I'm not going to try and drown you in self-sorrows. I'm sorry, I'll detract from that. To just say this, thank you again for all of the people who have subscribed. I truly do appreciate you. And anybody who joined me on the live stream journey with this art piece, I really appreciate you as well. And let me know in the comments below what you want to see next. I got a lot of things in the works, and like I said, I'm going to try my best to bring consistent content to you, but again, we go back to real life circumstance. It's going to take me a while to bring you content. And in the meantime, this is your host Zipsaw with Zipsaw's Art. You have yourself a good day. Toodles.